Hey everyone, my name is Rooster, and welcome back to Mechabellum. In today's video, we're going to have another community replay, although it does take place at around 1900 MMR, so we are again at the top end of the ladder. And the two players are going to be Narita Taishin and Penguin, and Penguin is the one who was kind enough to send in this replay, which does feature a whole lot of text being clicked and units being purchased. So without further ado, let's get into it. We have Aerial Specialist here picked up with Crawlers and Spiders for Penguin, which is a very solid pack. The one kind of problem you may face is if your opponent ends up starting with Sabers, but that always is the case when you're playing Spiders. If not, and if you're up against something like Sledgehammer and Hound, Spiders are great. They are still very capable late game, so I like the pack. Aerial Specialist pairs nicely. You can go into Phoenixes very easily. You can add the Wasps later for chaff, and sometimes you can even go into something like a Air Giant, such as Raiden or Overlord, if you need, the extra bit of damage. Narita here, I'm going to switch the perspective because we are watching this from Penguin's perspective, but Narita has the Training Specialist, lovely when you're starting with Hounds. I've definitely talked about that before. Allows you to get those Hound levels going without really having to stress, and that gives you the breakpoint up against the Crawlers. We have an immediate Phoenix purchase here for Penguin. I don't mind that. I think it's a great play when you already start with Chaff and Spiders. It puts you in a safe spot, and Narita is cognizant enough of the fact that this can happen, and so he purchases 2 marksmen, which I quite like. I think it's a fine play. They can struggle in the late game in these type of short range scenarios because they just like long range. That's where a lot of their stats go into. But in the early game like this, I think it does just fine, and Hound plus Sledgehammer, very hard to kill this early on, so it does result in a round win for Narita. We do have a headbutt because, the building layout here is rather lopsided, so pushing into this structure is not going to be that easy, and it does kind of guarantee the fact that we do get this headbutt on the right. In terms of chaff positioning, I think I would change the setup a little bit here for Penguin. I like the Spiders to be a little bit further apart, typically. That way you can still put something like a Titan in between, if you want to. At the very least here, there is enough space for something like a Giant, but do be aware of the fact that leaving some space can help you out in the late game, and we will definitely talk about that in some of the later rounds of this game. Now, round number 2, and we have Stormcaller picked up here from the unit drops. It's fine. I generally would never recommend you to go for Stormcaller if you're playing a headbutt though. The reason is, once again, Stormcaller is a unit that has a lot of stats pumped into its range. That means that it loves to use that range, and it's better suited for long range engagements. Same thing with marksmen. In these type of headbutts, they generally just do not get the time to get off all of their shots. And headbutts tend to happen very quickly because of, the fact that they're just so close range. And it just tends to, benefit other types of units. Things like Spiders, things like Sabers, Wraith, anything that has a lower type of range. And so round 2 here does result in a round loss. I think it would have been a lot better to go for a play very similar to what Narita did, which is this left side attack. It's a very, very common thing in high MMR. Whenever there's a unit drop this early on and you're in a headbutt, you attack the left side tower with something like a Crawler plus a Phoenix, or a Crawler and a Wasp, or a Crawler and a Phantom, or a Crawler and a Rhino. Any of those combinations, and it can give you the tempo to start getting a bit of a lead in the early game, which definitely helps out a lot in these aggressive positions on the right side. So my choice here would have gone to one of those 100% of the time. Arclight's not really necessary. I probably would have picked the Phantom Ray because it beats the Rhino, and then gone for a similar type of play on that left side. Arclight not necessary. We already have Chaff clear, and that's kind of the case for both players. And again, Stormcaller, I wouldn't pick. Round number 3, Assault Scorpion, definitely worth considering here. Penguin here goes for subsidized Stormcaller, so this kind of goes back into that whole thing about not getting baited into Stormcaller. It's a great unit if you're playing standard and your opponent is playing that as well, and you can use the range. But when you're up against fast units, these Crawlers are going to distract the first shots from the Stormcallers. Sledgehammers don't even really mind getting hit by Stormcallers, especially if they manage to get some levels. It's just really not like what you want. you'd much rather start fleshing out your chaff, buy more tarantulas, get techs on the tarantulas, because currently the enemy board dies to level 2 tarantulas with techs. Tarantulas are perfectly capable of killing hounds, sledgehammers that are lower level, if you give them the techs. But now we're kind of getting baited into this whole Stormcaller line, and you're gonna see they do fine, but the scaling on this is just not great in these type of scenarios. So I really would have just invested more into Tarantula, and it goes back to this whole thing that you will often hear me talk about in my videos, where you focus on your main chaff clear unit in the early game. That tends to be kind of the whole point. And your DPS doesn't have to be, you know, 4 or 5 different units. It typically is enough to just have 1 or 2. And in this case, it should have just been 1 or 2 Phoenixes on the right side, plus maybe some type of aggressive push on the left. But really nothing more than that. And, well, we could have already had, like, more crawlers in the back. That would have helped out with our chaff. It would have also meant that we don't need to buy that chaff later on, and we can use our deployments in the mid and late game for more important carries. This round ends up being, you know, a bit of a stalemate. It does still end up with 1 marksman winning, but already you can see, you know, triple Stormcaller in a different scenario would easily win there on round 3. But because it's a headbutt, it actually is rather close. Round number 4, Orbital Bombardment shows up, Missile Strike. I would say both of these are things that we could consider. Narita decides to go for the Missile Strike instead. I don't mind it. I think if it was round 3 Orbital, you definitely should have picked it. I still think there's maybe something to be said for picking it still. There's a high chance we do see it back, and it's just such a powerful spell for how cheap it is. Finally, we grab the range on the Tarantulas. You could consider going for Mechanical Rage first. Generally speaking, I would say it's range first on Tarantulas, but because it's such a headbutt, and the opponent is almost immediately in range already, you could consider going for Mech Rage, but keep in mind that if you do that, you probably want to follow it up with range the turn after. So you do kind of lock yourself into using those resources across 2 rounds. But that would be my aim here. Try and get range and Mech Rage on round 5. More Tarantulas being purchased, more Hounds being purchased for Narita, who is now starting to go for a bit of a play on the left side. He did pick up Assault Scorpion and didn't really decide to buy any. I don't know what that's about. I think Assault Scorpion is a good card, especially in headbutts. It kind of makes up for the fact that it typically doesn't do well in these engagements because it has too long of an attack interval. But I would have rather seen it for Penguin here than for Narita. Or if we are going to pick it, I would have liked to see some on the field. Because now we're starting to get to the point where there are so many Tarantulas that the DPS is getting a little bit iffy. It still gets there. The left side is just not well protected. And, well, we just can't be dealing with a Rhino with just a Tarantula and a Stormcaller. Neither of those units are meant to deal with Rhinos. So the defense here should have been better. There should just be a Phoenix somewhere here in the back. And again, it's better to just go for these classic pairings, right? Crawler, Tarantula, couple of Phoenixes, you'll be golden. Round number 5, improved firepower control system shows up. I don't think it's worth skipping here. You should always pick that up. It's just such a solid item, both on Tarantulas if you manage to get levels, or on Phoenix. It's too cheap to skip. Efficient Giant Manufacturing gets picked up for Narita. Again, the card picking here is a little all over the place. I don't mind it. I think Efficient Giant is great with these type of Hound boards because Hounds are super flexible. You can buy Fortresses, you can buy Raiden, you can buy Overlord. So I don't mind that. It's just the Assault Scorpion pick that we went for doesn't gel with the Efficient Giant Manufacturing because Scorpion can be your main carry if you want to and you have some anti-air. But if you pick Efficient Giant, then you're trying to go for a Giant as your main carry. But maybe Narita here thought, oh, I accidentally picked Assault Scorpion. I actually don't want to do anything with that. And so let me go for Efficient Giant instead, which is perfectly fine, right? Those type of misclicks or mistakes are going to happen. You might have a plan and then think, oh, actually, that doesn't seem right. It's better sometimes to abandon what you were going for and just accept that you maybe misspent 50 or 100 resources rather than try and make something work that is going to end up losing you the game. Finally, a Phoenix gets purchased here on the left. You go for AP on the Stormcallers. Again, I wouldn't bother. This makes their attack interval even longer. Means that they won't shoot as often. Means that in these type of close range engagements, you're getting even less value out of these units. If these were Assault Stormcallers, by the way, it would have been a different story. Those I don't mind in short range engagements. But yeah, in this scenario, I wouldn't really bother. The main reason why Penguin is winning right now is because Narita doesn't have any DPS, right? There's only 2 marksmen on that side of the board, and they're dealing with a ton of tarantulas. And keep in mind, they're still getting things done here because the Stormcallers are just not really hitting. Look at that, right? 5,000 damage on that one, 8,000 damage on that one, 5,000 damage. That's just not the numbers you want to see, right? Stormcallers have to be dealing at least 10, if not 20k damage, I think, by this stage of the game. That's how powerful they can be in the right scenario. Again, very, very short, or very, very even round on round 5, but still Narita Taishin on full hit points at 4,900 and inching out a win. And we actually got to the second round of unit reinforcements, with Farseer here being picked up. Anti-air, DPS, a little bit of a concern, and actually we're going to sell that Farseer and go for a factory with a missile intercept for Narita Taishin. Now, in terms of carry, I would probably not go for factory because it's the most expensive carry you could go for, right? It's Titan class. It's 800 resources plus unlock. It also does not gel well with efficient giant manufacturing. You're going to need to buy at least 3 giants or titans to break even with this card. And, well, I mean, good luck fitting that many factories on the board. You can, but it'll take you an awful long time. And by the time you will get 3 or more factories, the 50 or 100 resources you're going to be making are not going to pay off for the fact that you put yourself down in resources during the mid game, where 100 or 150 resources mean more than on round 10, where you're getting 2,000 resources. So that's one thing. I probably would have gone for something like an Overlord here. Opponent does not have great anti-air. It's just 2 Phoenixes with no range. It avoids the Stormcallers. It's great against these type of, you know, chunkier units like Tarantulas, makes them easier to hit. And it pairs really nicely with the rest of the board, gives you great anti-air, which maybe could have been a bit of a concern considering we only have 2 marksmen. And it's less vulnerable. It's not as much of an investment. It's easier to spam, and late game Overlord is almost an insta-win against most boards. So that would have been my pick. Now, perhaps he didn't go into it because Farseer and Mustang were offered here, which I honestly think... Yeah, I get why you wouldn't pick them. I think Mustang would have been fine here, though. It's just always good to have Mustang on the board in the late game, almost always. So I probably would have picked that instead of the Void Eyes here. The Void Eyes are fine, though. They are good frontline for the Tarantulas. They're good into things like Hounds. So I don't mind this pick either. But yeah, that would have been my go-to. We go for Factory with Missile Intercept. I think it's only worth it if the Stormcallers are actually doing anything. But if you look at the Stormcaller stats, and I would recommend you do this in your games, right? How much are they doing? Again, 6k, 8k, 5k. That's nothing. These Tarantulas are dealing 20k a pop, right? So what you should be countering here is these guys, is the Tarantulas. So grab more DPS, which Factory does provide. It's just not worth taking this on it, right? Because it makes it more expensive to go for things like range or overload if that is your carry of choice. So in some way here, the play from Penguin, which is an incorrect one in this scenario, gets justified by the fact that we see Missile Intercept Factory come out. Obviously, it's going to do very well because Factory is hard to kill if you don't have the correct unit for it. And, well, there's no massive amounts of DPS on the board right now for Penguin. He might still be able to get away with it, though, because the thing is, Factory needs some range to be able to intercept. You can see this one is easy to intercept, but if it's, you know, up in the face of the Stormcallers, it doesn't have that time to get rid of all the missiles, and it will actually get hit. So, despite the Factory usually being you know, a unit that wants to win the turn it comes out because it's such a big surprise, it does end up dying. And even worse than that, it ends up losing, I think, the round here. Even though Narita had been winning up until this point. So it really kind of showcases that this is not a very powerful round. And the reason is just because, you know, it's not worth spending all these resources on a factory in this case. It's just not worth it. There are cheaper alternatives, and missile interception just does not matter in this scenario. If you're really worried, you might as well buy 2 missile interceptors in the back. With the way the rounds have gone, it's unlikely that they would die, but I just wouldn't be going for this. Round number 7, and we see advanced defensive tactics picked up for Penguin. Can be very good late game. It does cost, you know, a good chunk of money, but it will scale very, very nicely. And I think here, nothing actually was done about the factory, which is a bit of a mystery to me. I don't know. I think high explosive might have been picked up already. We probably see subterranean blitz being picked up, as well as second defense enhancement. So the units are very, very tanky, but I would be a little bit more afraid of this round, because there is a world here where instead of this factory being leveled, which is a problem in and of itself, by the way, you start seeing more factories, and you really can't be too laid back when your opponent goes for these type of plays, because factory will scale out of control at some point. And if you're letting your opponents do that by giving them, you know, 1 or 2 or even 3 free rounds because you're not really addressing it with something like an Abyss, you might get in trouble. We see oil being used to try and slow down that factory, which is a perfectly fine play. But yeah, the damage here simply going to be lacking, and a lot of these spiders are going to get stuck. So again, right now the big problem for Penguin is going to be that lack of DPS, which again, it would have been on the board if all of these Stormcallers were something else. HE did get picked up. I think in this scenario, once again, Mechanical Rage would be better, because you don't lose the damage, and a lot of the enemy chaff, or a lot of the enemy kind of distraction, also comes from these mid-sized units. Things like the Sledgehammers and the Hounds, and Mech Rage is a lot better into that than HE is. So do keep that in mind. Factory here will win. Again, there's not enough DPS on the board, so that was kind of to be expected. And now Penguin really, really needs to make sure that he buys something that can deal with that. Round number 8, we do get unit reinforcements. Triple Mustang here, a consideration. I mean, it's just a lot of free deployments. Once again, Mustang are nice to have late game. It protects you against a lot of Wasp plays that you might start seeing, so I think that would be a fine pickup. Narita goes for Sabertooth, which I imagine will simply get sold. I think for Narita, Mustang here would be better for the reasons I've mentioned. If you are going to take and sell, you should go for Typhoon because it sells for more. And indeed, we are going to sell, so a bit of a mistake there. Typhoon is free, sells for 600 total. Sabertooth also sells for 600 total, but you had to pay 50. So do keep that in mind. Let me go for STEELBALLS for Penguin. Bit of a risky play. STEELBALLS can eventually sometimes win against factories, especially in these lower range scenarios, but I probably would have tried to sell and go for something like an Abyss here. I just find that to be a bit safer. And especially if I see that my opponent didn't go for Mustang, well, I have a free line into Wasp as well to try and protect my Abyss the following turn. The one issue is, and I mentioned this at the start of the game, there is no real space for Titans, right? We just do not have the gaps between our crawlers to be able to accommodate for that. So with that in mind, I probably wouldn't have gone Abyss, and I guess this line is an option, but I would be afraid here of going for STEELBALLS. We do get a lot of them for free, and we grab the range enhancement, but we are up against a level 2 factory. Another one has been added. Range is now the second tech. You know, typically you would want to be up in tempo rather than down tempo when you start going to counter these factories with STEELBALLS. Now, there is a very nice flank coming in, which, I mean, the left side has been a bit ignored by Narita. think at this point you probably would have wanted something over there, even if just a crawler, because that would have been able to defend. And it does, in fact, result in a round win. A massive one at that for Penguin, right? Look at the amount of units that are still alive. At this point, the chaff clear is just a lot better if you manage to get rid of those bigger units, because we've got a ton of tarantulas, double-teched, and, well, it's still a menace as a chaff clear unit. Especially, you know, against things like these hounds, which just cannot compete right now. Round number 9, and nothing too interesting here. Amplifying core could be fine, but it's probably just a skip, I would imagine. Oh, we do actually pick up that amp core. It's a fine item. It is good on things like tarantula, but I think realistically here the damage is not coming from the tarantulas anymore, and you would rather want to invest into the steel balls. We're gonna go for the new tech, Kinetic Charge, which did receive a buff, and I do think that it's a very good tech now, because the ramp up is so much faster. But I probably wouldn't be putting the steel balls over here. The problem is that this is already quite close to the line. The steel balls are not going to be traveling a lot, and if they're not traveling, you don't get any benefit from Kinetic Charge. So if you were going to click this, the steel balls needed to be over here. And if you were planning to do this beforehand, you should have positioned the steel balls right over there already the moment that they came out. The new ones also should be in the back. I think it would be better here to go for something like Fortified Target Lock or even Mechanical Division, really, which you can't go wrong with. Super, super good scaling tech and very, very hard to deal with. Opponent doesn't really have chaff clear that would be able to easily get rid of that. Now, speaking of chaff clear, though, we do suddenly have quad-tech factories with overload and high explosive being picked up, which will help tremendously against steel balls. Factories can clear quite well themselves if you equip them with these techs. Left side still, though, really just criminally underdefended. I mean, this tower is level 1. I don't think that we could justify going for a double tech here on the factories if it meant leaving this side of the board open. At the very minimum, there should be one level up in that tower. Oil should be purchased to be put on the ground to slow down the army. And really, probably we would just want more factories. I know that range and overload here, or overload and HE, is good, but you might as well just buy 2 more factories and add one of them defensively here, add another one in the middle, and that'll probably do just as well. Factory is one of those units that benefits a lot from buying more of them, and honestly a lot of units are that way, right? The more you have of a unit, the more the techs justify themselves and become more valuable. And in fact, we are going to get a bit of a stalemate here yet again, where the Phoenix ends up killing this factory. I imagine 30 seconds left. I think it should be able to get there. Maybe it is just a stalemate. Let's have a look. No, it looks like the Phoenix will eventually get there, but a very, very minimal round. And yeah, I think round wins here should be probably a lot bigger for Narita if we purchase more of those units and we defend that left side and don't get debuffed. Now, the steel balls are starting to get a bit out of control. We have triple tech, fortified target lock gets picked up. Another factory finally finds its way on that left side of the board, and it gets turned into a bit of a left side attack, which I do like. This left side is very vulnerable, I think. There's not that much chaff. The rest of the units are quite exposed, and a factory should be able to make its way through relatively easily. So I like that play. We do have the crawler over here, missile, defensive rhino drop to deal with the steel balls. I think that's all well and good. Other plays Narita could start thinking about is buying some Wasps, because, I mean, both players in this case are relatively vulnerable to it, and none of those Mustangs were picked up in the unit drops. So yeah, that is something that you could think about as well. Obviously, buying more factories here makes sense, and buying more steel balls for Penguin makes sense as well. I would expect somewhat of a retaliatory attack. That tends to be the case when the opponent gets debuffed a bunch. They will start putting units over there, and they might try to turn the tables. or turn the tide against you. So you should be a little bit cognizant of that and maybe start defending a little bit. Perhaps start adding some steel balls over there. We're going to go for more crawlers, which I don't mind. I mean, crawlers are good, but I probably would try and buy a few more steel balls. Although I guess with the levels and the third tech, Penguin might not have had the money. So in that case, buying more crawlers is always nice. We also have second attack enhancement. So lots and lots and lots of stats on the blue side of the board. Left side factory is making its way in. It is getting locked onto though, and the Phoenixes are doing a pretty good job of taking it out. Actually, it looks like it will die. But on the right side, the blue factories have managed to get rid of all of the steel balls. Still though, this side, a little under-defended, will result in a tower debuff. I'm not sure it matters. I say that, one steel ball is locked onto the factory and chunks it massively. So that will end up going down. And yeah, once again, just the left side tower defense is costing here a lot of damage for Narita. It actually ends up in another loss once again because the Phoenixes end up surviving. So what was a crushing round on the right side of the board ends up being a loss for Narita because of why is this doing crazy things? Okay, there we go. Because of the lack of left side defense. Finally, we do see some Wasps being picked up, and they're going to be defending the left side of the board. I do like that. I think it's a good play to make. And we have a range on the marksman. I guess that is being purchased because Narita wants the marksman to stand behind the factories, and they're realizing that the Phoenixes are creating a lot of trouble. I don't think that's a bad idea. Again, right, if we didn't go into factories and we went for something like Overlord, this likely wouldn't have been an issue. But considering we do go for this line, I think grabbing a few marksmen, ranging them, is the correct play to make. We go for more hounds with a marksman there. I really do prefer the Wasp to defend the flank. Also because the opponents could try and add Wasps onto the flank, and then you have another problem to deal with. Hound and Marksman is fine, but don't be afraid to missile this on round 11. You're not going to miss the 50 resources, and the steel balls are just not good into your crawlers. So getting rid of those immediately is going to help you out. Factories are being leveled here. I probably would have wanted to see more. Once again, Mechabellum is just really one of those games where you get more text on a unit, means that you want to have more of said units. And that is exactly what is happening here with those steel balls. As you can see, a lot more are getting picked up, and we might even be working towards the third tech mechanical division, which certainly would be worth it. Finally, the right side is winning though. The left side still does collapse, but I think this time around with the range on the marksman, they should stand behind the factories, and it will result in a round win. And Penguin doesn't have that many hit points to his name, so 324 is what he's left with as we enter round number 12. Now here, Mustang shows up once more, this time 3 level 2 Mustangs, and Abyss shows up as well. I think that at this point you might get baited into trying to make an Abyss work or something. It probably is just better to invest in the units you already have. So I don't mind what I see here. What I do mind is that we're leveling level 2 factories to level 3. There is no reason to do this. At level 2, they've got ample damage to deal with all of these mid-sized units. You should just invest that money into buying new factories, right? Get more guns on the field, more missile interception, more range, overload, HE, all of that, to try and deal with what at this point has to be like 12 steel balls or something like that, with 4 techs, including mechanical division. Chaff clear is going to be put to the test here for Narita's board. More stuff is being added to the flank. Not a big fan of this. I think Penguin should be ranging his Mustangs here rather than leave them unranged. I even think one of them... No, okay, they do get kept. They didn't get sold. But there's no reason to do this type of stuff on the left flank. I know that it's being under-defended or poorly defended, but don't use your deployments. Don't start putting more than 2 or 3 deployments on a flank. especially this late into the game when you're on 300 hit points. The Mustangs didn't do anything. They instantly died. So you just threw away 300 resources for no good reason. And I mean, you might still end up winning, but you know, you need to use all the resources that are available to you to make sure you don't die here. Thankfully for Penguin, it looks like finally he's hit critical mass of steel balls. The mechanical division is creating too many problems, and it allows some of the steel balls to get through and finish off all of those factories. It's a very, very close round still, but Penguin is still in it. And we are going to send this to round 13 with Narita being down below 1,000 hit points. Suddenly, the comeback could be real. Round number 13. I mean, heavy armor is fine. I would probably pick up Missile Strike here if I was Narita and try and missile those Mustangs. And, well, buying more factories is probably what you would have to do here. Again, I would have rather had the 1,200 resources available from getting those level 3 factories and have more factories on the board already. Because now we only have 3 deployments and things might get a little bit tricky. A missile strike is available that gets used on the flank. I'm fine with that. Again, I think you should just missile these this late into the game, right? That is the weakness of going for flanks. They're very hard to defend. You can get missiled easily. I wouldn't be going for this type of play once again, right? We're in the last round. You're going to have these things spawn in for 8 seconds and not contribute to the main fight. That just is not worth it. You should be using your resources to make your main board stronger. Finally, we do buy Sticky Oil Bomb. This is one of the things I will mention time and again in my videos, but people just forget that you can buy that spell. This should have been purchased way, way earlier. The moment that you see your opponent is within, you know, even like sub 2k sometimes, and you have oil available, try and see if you can make a play with it, because it just completely decimates chaff on one side of the field and will often give you that final round win that you need to secure the game. And yeah, at this point, just look at these steel balls, right? It is completely out of control. There are far too many steel balls for these factories to deal with, and frankly, I don't think there is much Narita could have done this round. I have in fact tried to replay it a couple times, but there are simply too many steel balls at this point. You can go for a Wasp play, but it just results in a bit of a stalemate, and it ends up sending it to round 14 in the best case scenario, at which point you would still be in massive trouble. So yeah, Penguin ends up completing the comeback on round 13 and beating the factories with a grand total of, I mean, that is a lot of steel balls, right? We have 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 on the main board, and then we also have 16 and 17 in total on the flanks, which is rather crazy. Now, what should Narita have done? Again, round 13 is a bit tough, but round 12, we could have still gone for some plays, I believe. So let's try and take over. I don't think we need to pick anything here. It's better to just invest into the board we have. So let's grab the Abyss, let's sell it, and then not pick up those factory levels. It's not worth it. I will go for some oil play though. So let's try and do that, and then buy a Badger and put it somewhere over here. We need to loan, temp range, temp speed, all of that is very important. And then we probably just end up buying a whole bunch more factories, if I'm being honest. Here we go, second defense enhancement, why not? Let's put one of these factories over here. Let's put one of them somewhere over here to defend the left side a bit better. And then let's grab these factories and try and send them into the tower if we can. I hope I can grab that other factory. Should be able to, I think. Okay, there we go. Temp speed has been picked up. We should just missile that. If I missile it, I think we can probably stall this for long enough that the balls aren't that much of an issue. And then, I mean, we still have some money left, and I don't really know what to do with it. I guess we can just grab some more missiles, because why not? Try and open up the field a little bit more. And I mean, 450 resources, that's really a lot left. We could just level one of the factories if we want to, and just call it a day, I think. Let's see. How does that perform? There are the Mustangs as well, but this factory will fire back, and yeah, the Mustangs will just instantly die. The crawlers will be annoying. Those steel balls for a bit. They do kill the hounds, but not really that big of an issue. Factory gets locked onto by the steel balls, which isn't ideal, but I think the one on the outside should be fine. On the left side, you can see the fire is creating a lot of problems for those steel balls. The moment they die, the crawlers pop out, and most of them will end up dying. And, well, you can see this factory, even though it does get locked onto a couple times, ends up surviving for quite a while. We get a debuff, and that looks like 4 factories will survive, which should be plenty because Penguin was down to 300 hit points, I believe. Marksmen are going to survive as well, and that would be game. So, remember guys, you can buy oil. It is on the tower. It's very, very powerful, and there are a lot of plays you can do with it. So try and look for those if your opponent is within striking distance of, well, being defeated, right? But that kind of shows you guys what Narita could have done. It all boils down to, you know, buying more of the units that you decided to make your carry. So in this case, you have to ask yourself, is it worth picking up levels on things like factories, which have so much DPS that really they won't have any trouble killing steel balls at level 2. They'll do just fine, right? They don't need the level 3. So use your money. You've got quad tech factories, buy more of them. You can't just be having 3 of them. Also because we picked up efficient giant manufacturing, right? I don't think it was worth picking that card, but if you did pick that card, try and justify it by buying more of these titans. Anyway, if you guys like this video, please leave a thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought about it. Big thanks once again to Penguin for sending this in. And if you want to stay up to date with my latest content, please consider subscribing. And if you want to see me play live, check me out on Twitch. With that being said, take care guys, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.